We are all fruits from her tree. My mother is Mother Earth. My mother is Mother Earth.
Okay, thank you. So today I come on the stage to mainly use this platform to speak about an urgent, important issue that I feel is really requiring more attention from all of the communities around the world. So the today's topic is China's biggest lie on international scale. On international scale. So I coded this, and three of the main things that I want to speak about today is China's biggest lie on an international scale. So recently, there's been a lot of changes in technology and the new AI technology and internet has come, and so many different things that have emerged in the last 30, 40, 50 years, and that has brought huge changes in the world. So here the statement I want to make is one of the biggest international scale lie that has been created by China is that Tibet is China or Tibet is part of China. And every time with the especially with the smaller nations, but even with the larger important nations, one of the economic coercive power that's been used to letting other nations to sign a paper that says Tibet is part of China, Tibet is part of China, Tibet. So, which is farthest from truth, which is farthest from truth from a historical and from legal expert point of view, and which I will show you. So, Tibet for thousands of years have been governed, ruled, and lived prosperously. One of the most spiritually awakened community, society, location in the world that we could claim. And linguistically, Tibetan languages, phonetic, Chinese, and pictographic, completely different categories. Tibetans have developed one's on our own economic currencies, from printing money to printing coins and coppers and you know monetary systems. Tibetan kings have married various other queens from neighboring countries, including the Nepalese and the Chinese Tang dynasty since way back in seventh, 8th centuries. So all of the historical real data have always Tibet has always been a separate nation until 1959, which from the from 1949, from the formations of the Communist parties, People's Republic of America, China, and from then the invasion, the annexation of Tibet started since then, and then gradually came the 1950s where 1950 where the Champa War was fought, and then 51 coerced forced signing of the 17 point. But even all of those signatures treaties never had any significant change in the people of Tibet, on the real, culture of Tibet. Only after 1959, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama and thousands and hundreds of thousands of Tibetans had to flee to become refugees in the entire history of Tibet, never had happened. So a country that has enjoyed thousands of years of its own freedom and being the top of the world, never been invaded neither by British, no by Mongols, no by Manchus, no by anyone, and Tibetans have always enjoyed and hence the Tibetan culture is very spiritual centered and unique and profoundly honest and kind, and the Buddhist Tantrayanic and Sutrayanic, one of the most sophisticated and developed intellectually, spiritually sophisticated society came into Tibet, and that has been turned into hell since 1959. Tibetans inside Tibet cannot travel outside, and the outsiders from America or many other world, and even the medias couldn't access Tibet. The human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, U.S. states, and various other international organizations have stated again and again that Tibet today is one of the least free place in the world, all under the watch of China. While the communist China is becoming rich and using its using its uh, state status, is continuously spreading lies about Tibetan history. It's completely falsifying Tibet as some kind of a feudal, slave-owned society that liberated by China, just as same as the Nazi Hitler used the same kind of a propaganda machines to say that the Jews were deserved to be put in concentration camp because they are liberating them. Oh, that same lie has been done by Hitler, has been used by any kind of, oppressive regimes to continue to use their agenda. And the real truth of the matter is Tibet has always been an independent, sovereign nation. And the fact of the matter, millions of people inside Tibet, an ancient nation, continuously suffering from from torture, arbitrary detention, oppression in the 21st century manner. It's fair to call the current state of the peoples in Tibet, millions of people, and not just Tibetans, but also Uyghurs and Inner Mongolians and democratic activists and Falun Gong spiritual practitioners, and many other who have different views in China are oppressed. But especially the pain and the suffering of the Tibetan people is enormous, that in fact led, since 2009, more than 157, some say 50, more than that, 59, 159 people self-burned their body to express their discontent with the government's ruling of China. And so that's one of the biggest lie on international scale. And the second, recently, if you might have seen some short, hyped, snapped video depicting Dalai Lama, and a title says "Suck My Tongue," to completely culturally misinterpret the event without giving the context and the entire content of issues, and turning one of the most joyful celebration of graduation party for hundreds some students from a very prestigious academic school, and the boy and his mom is right there, has the organizer, and his family is right there. They were rejoicing, and the CCP, the Communist Propaganda Party, have used money and a massive amount of AI bot technology, and exploited that short event to create the defamation campaign for against His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and that news spreads all over the world, which emerged later. Hundreds and thousands of people all around, many different Tibet supporters and Himalayan Tibet groups and Buddhist groups and Tibet truth supporters rose up later to stand with His Holiness Dalai Lama. Even that is also to defame one of the most truly spiritual, venerable master Buddhist teacher, leader, and one of the most important peace creator in our time, inspirational in every way possible. And that attack was also one of the biggest lie in an international scale. And so these are kind of the lies that the Communist Party have created. And first, I would like to, show you this on the Congressional Executive Hearing on China conducts hearing on Tibet. So first, I would like to show you the international legal expert who has spoke at the congressional hearing, Mr. Michael Van, and let us hear what he has to say to the question from the U.S. Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My testimony today is based on the findings of 10 years of collaborative research, historical and legal, most of which I carried out during my tenure at the School of Historical Studies of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and the findings are published in these two books. Today, I'd like to call your attention to one of those findings and its international legal ramifications. Contrary to what the PRC claims, Tibet was historically not a part of China. Though not always independent in the modern legal sense of the term, and over the centuries subject to various degrees of Mongol, Manchu, and even British authority or influence, Tibet was never a part of China. The PRC did not inherit Tibet from the Republic of China or from earlier empires as it claims. Tibet was in fact an independent state in the modern sense of the term, in fact and law from 1912 to 1951, when the PRC took it by force. So the PRC's military invasion of Tibet constituted an act of aggression and violated the peremptory norm of international law prohibiting the acquisition of territory by the use of force against another state. And this informs the legitimacy, or not, of China's presence and rule of Tibet. China does not have sovereignty over Tibet, and therefore it is occupying Tibet illegally. That, in turn, informs the international community's legal obligations and its responsibilities regarding the Sino-Tibetan conflict. Governments are prohibited under international law from recognizing China's annexation of Tibet, and they have the positive obligation to help bring about a resolution of the Sino-Tibetan conflict, to end the occupation of Tibet, and to enable the Tibetan people to exercise self-determination. As you stated, it is US policy to support a negotiated resolution to the conflict between China and Tibet.
So I just want to say that this is international experts who are bringing up the issue of Tibet from an historical fact point, not just propagandas. And then the others might one of the thing is one of the kind of a Communist Party statement is since antiquity that Tibet has been part of China, and many leaders, many even governments were, because of economic incentives, were coerced into signing a paper that says Tibet is part of China. Obviously, different countries have their own incentive to do because you are forced to or coerced economically, or but it doesn't make the fact of the historical fact of Tibet being a sovereign country that's been forcibly annexed, hence the occupied annexation, or the Tibet today becomes occupied. And also, more than that, the millions of people that have been denied of their basic freedom to speech, freedom to faith, freedom to movement, constitute crime against humanity. That's on that base. And on top of that, I want to bring you the Chinese expert historian who brings from the historical document from China itself, from the imperial writings, to know that Tibet and China has been separate countries. And let's hear from the Chinese expert historian, Mr. Lau, Professor Lau. Here you go.
Pre-1949 official historical records clearly show that Tibet was never part of China before the PRC invaded Tibet in 1950. This is an important issue because China is a signatory to the relevant covenants of the League of Nations and the United Nations, which means that since 1919, China has promised not to gain territories through military conquest thereafter. Moreover, the PRC incessantly condemns other countries for their past colonial conquests and the past bullying of China. Therefore, the PRC needs to cover up its 1950 Tibet conquest as a unification of a territory that has been part of China since antiquity. Sadly, today many governments incorrectly believe this ridiculous lie, and this is part of the reason why many Western democracies fail to provide adequate support for upholding Tibet's sovereignty. There are two important foundation concepts behind my theme. Foundation A, there is an abundance of authentic and reliable pre-1949 Chinese official historical records. The PRC version of Chinese history is very, very different from the version of Chinese history reflected in these pre-1949 official Chinese records. Foundation B, we use a comprehensive range of objective criteria to examine whether Tibet was part of China. Thus, to judge whether Tibet was part of China during China's Ming Dynasty, we use official classical Chinese records to examine, for example, number one, whether the Ming Empire had designated Tibet as part of China or as a foreign entity, say via a promulgated map. Number two, was the Ming Empire able to conduct census or collect taxes in Tibet? Number three, was the Ming Empire able to appoint or dismiss judges or governing officials in Tibet? Number four, was China's language, legal system, and monetary system used in Tibet, etc., etc. Combining foundations A and B, we can prove the following conclusion. China's pre-1949 official records clearly show that Tibet was never part of China before PRC's
Never part of
1950
China.
invasion.
Tibet was
We
never part
also
of China.
prove that PRC's so-called evidence of sovereignty over Tibet are based on not only distortions, but outright fabrications and forgeries of pre-1949 Chinese records.
Did you guys hear that? That's what the communist authoritarian dictatorial regime do. Fabricate history and dictates the mass of people under authoritarian rules. And let's hear, this is expert historian Mr. Professor Lam.
System
Let's
used
hear
in
that again.
Tibet, etc., etc. Combining foundations A and B, we can prove the following conclusion. China's pre-1949 official records clearly show that Tibet was never part of China before PRC's 1950 invasion. We also prove that PRC's so-called evidence of sovereignty over Tibet are based on not only distortions, but outright fabrications and forgeries of pre-1949 Chinese records. This means that a current permanent member of the UN Security Council militarily conquered a foreign country in 1950 and continues to subjugate it today. This crime obligates the intervention of the international community. I'm going to show you examples of these proofs. The first example is of a Ming Dynasty map. It's on your tablet. This is labeled as map 1, purported to show the entire Ming Empire. Regarding my foundation A stated earlier, this proof is from a Ming Dynasty 1461 AD government publication. That is, it comes from a very authoritative Chinese source. Regarding my foundation B, it relates to an objective sovereignty claim, depiction on a national map. This map labels, if you look at the map, you will show that the Chinese territories, the labels are framed in white lettering on black background. In contrast, it labels non-Chinese territories such as Japan in the east, and then Tibet over here on the west, in non-framed black lettering on white background. The contrast is literally in black and white. In other words, the Ming government clearly declares that Tibet is a non-China foreign entity. If you would flip the tablet, you would see that map number 2 is example of a Qing dynasty proof. This is from a Qing dynasty 1732 government publication purported to show the entire Qing Empire. On this map, the Qing government shows the position corresponding to today's Tibet Autonomous Region, which is the TAR, as a blank space. Hundreds of similar proofs are presented in this book that I've written. Most of them involve textual records and not just merely pictorial proofs like this. And they are, of course, much more reliable. Thank you very much.
So this is like literal historian expert proof, written books about actual history, and that is not propaganda. Sadly, many nowadays today that I see, if you write Tibetan history on the YouTube, you can find even YouTube influencers most probably getting paid. The communists corrupt, money, and are propagating all kinds of baseless statement that Tibet is feudal, the Lama is slave owner, all kinds of stuff that's far from truth. And then, second, here I want to bring you U.S. congressional on the same day that His Holiness Dalai Lama was giving that, event with the graduation ceremony, which that edited clip has spread all over the world to defame His Holiness Dalai Lama, a coordinated campaign from the CCP, Communist Party's, internet department, and obviously they hid it. But on that same day, in the U.S. House of Committee, there was a House China Committee holds hearing on Chinese Communist Party's threat to America. Now, this is publicly written as threat to America from the U.S. congressional, and let's hear the expert, defense expert, industrial expert, and intelligence expert reporting to the U.S. congressional at the U.S. congressional hearing about China. Okay, let us hear this.
Mr. Auchincloss. This committee is about competition, and the competition is about values. As the testimony of Ms. Tong Yi exemplifies, the Chinese Communist Party rejects the inherent value of the individual. It believes people are pawns of the state. The United States, by contrast, was founded upon universal and self-evident truths centered on the dignity and freedom of the individual. Mr. Pottinger, in your written testimony, you assert that free societies like ours need not employ disinformation. And I agree that truth is on the side of freedom and democracy, but I'm concerned that lies spread faster and deeper. How can the United States engage other nations, particularly in the global south, in diffusing propaganda and building civic support for the rules-based international order?
Congressman, thanks for your question. I think that helping fund independent journalism in countries in the global south is critical right now. That includes small Pacific Island nations, includes large African countries, certainly includes countries in our own hemisphere south of our border. The work that is being done to identify government proxies and their bots and others who are really representing, but not always transparently, autocratic governments need to be called out. I think it doesn't mean that you have to silence autocrats, but it means making sure that there's truth in advertising, that people know about them.
General McMaster, another element of binding allied and non-aligned nations.
And then, so I want to show you another event where There's a lot of on that hearing. There's 2 3 hours of continuous, and I that was one of the most important hearing that I have heard. The threat to democratically free countries, including United States and others, is real, and that's what the expert and the intelligence communities are reporting publicly to the people of America and to the people of the world and world alliance, to become aware that authoritarian and dictatorial regimes does use very sophisticated propaganda tools to try to change the narrative and change people's opinion, because the authoritarian regimes like the communist China have always brainwashed their own people, and the biggest threat to their own security is their own people. And that's why more defense money is spent on internal security in China, unlike any other countries. So let's hear another congressman talking about after the congressional hearing went. It's a lot of information to provide you, but I want to just you know give you the key.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank our witnesses tonight. And let's begin by, as a committee and as a nation, making one thing clear to everyone around the world. The Chinese Communist Party is a threat to the United States. It is the threat of our lifetime. The CCP actively undermines the U.S. and our world economy. It also attempts to use the principles of our republic against us. Beijing is intent on building a military that not only threatens the world in the Indo-Pacific, but across the globe. Beijing also has no problem in exploiting our financial systems against us. It also illegally seizes natural resources, both here in the United States and with our friends around the world. And insidiously, it attempts to shape the thoughts, the ideas, and the viewpoints of our children through their use of media. And there are many other elements that we can talk about there. Mr. Pottinger, I want to get you to elucidate, why does the Chinese Communist Party seem so intent on challenging the United States? And how does Beijing view America? And maybe most importantly, what are the CCP's vulnerabilities? What are their weaknesses? And what do we have in it as an advantage over the CCP?
Sir, the Chinese Communist Party has viewed us as the primary adversary going back quite a long time, but very clearly around the time of the end of the Cold War. So when the Soviet Union, which had been China's primary adversary up to that point, fell apart, Beijing focused on us as their primary ideological threat, military threat. Chairman Gallagher spoke about the paranoia that really runs through the heart of the CCP, fear that it's going to be subjected to color revolutions, that democracy and freedom might come to their shores in ways that would unseat them. Look, the vulnerabilities are significant. I think the most important vulnerability of all is that the party fears most of all its own people. The Chinese Communist Party fears the Chinese people. And we've seen that on display. We saw it, as Tong Yi mentioned, the recent demonstrations in China where Xi Jinping was unwilling to remove this draconian zero COVID policy of lockdowns, even when it was causing their economy to crater, even when it was not working against containing the virus. And yet, when did he finally give up the policy? It was when those brave young people, many of them young women, who led those protests on the streets of Chinese cities. Once that happened, he gave up the policy overnight and announced that COVID was merely a cold and nothing to worry about. So they're fearful of their own people.
Very good, thank you.
So this is Mr. Pottinger, U.S. Home Defense Minister, expert. And so today I just want to conclude on these, that what's happening in Tibet is not that China is liberated, but they have committed a crime against humanity. Since 1959, Tibetans inside Tibet, millions of them being oppressed. And even a picture of His Holiness Dalai Lama Lenju into jail and torture, and they've used torture, intimidation, concentration camps and prisons to oppress the people of Tibet. And on the international front, they've used propagandas and falsified histories to coerce every nation to sign a paper says Tibet is part of China, and then telling the lies, just like the Germans did for validating their invasion of the rest of the world during the Second World War Hitler Nazi regime, and they collapsed, and China too shall. The Communist Party will collapse. That the paper daikon, and then the culture genocide of the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, and those are actually the real event that's happening. And I think it's fair to say what's happening to Tibetans in Tibet is a modern day Holocaust in a magnitude that's similar or worse during the concentration during the Hitler's master plan to exterminate the Jewish people from the face of the earth. And so the same kind of a magnitude, but in a modern form. The modern form of Holocaust is happening in Tibet, and that is what the Chinese government has been continuing to cover up and lie from the international platform, and hence that's the China's biggest lie on international scale. And so these are the real things. So I hope everybody will, from now after the defamation of the snapshot video spreading all over the world, and even the media is portraying it as it's so real issues, and they did such a master game of portraying what's not true as true and true as false. So it proves that in an internet age, in this information age, that every one of us must do more research until we find the real truth. And even my words, there's an old Tibetan saying that if somebody tells you, here go, I give you a gold, then you must check the gold. You can't just accept it from their words. You can't just accept it from mere appearance or YouTube video or news or medias or whatever. You have to check. And if it's gold, then you have to cut it and rub it with the stones or whatever object you rub to make sure that it's real gold. And you can even burn it to check. And if it's true gold, then it will prove itself. So the truth, it will prove itself. And I am here to share you with the truth of the evidences. But please, you do your research, and it's more important for all of us to develop these kind of a research ability to really find out the truth. Otherwise, the modern day China's lie on an international scale is going to continue. So I hope you all have a beautiful time, and may there be peace and well-being for the all conscious collective, so that one day we all be able to live in a society, in a country, in a world where there's no more need of war, weapons, no more need of prisons and prisoners, and may all the conscious collectives be awakened for the luminosity of virtue's awakening. Thank you. Om.